Good morning, or good afternoon, or even good evening to you, depending on what time you're listening to this new episode of the Raising Musos podcast, where we share insights and advice, recommendations, and stories to help parents raise young musicians. My name is Eliza and I'm a harp and piano teacher. I'm also the director of a little music school here in Perth in Western Australia called Music Makers Academy, where we teach lots of different instruments. And so I'm here with a new episode. This one is about a pretty controversial topic from what I see online, and today I'm going to talk about practice incentives and whether or not it's something you should be implementing at home. Now, obviously, practice is something that so many families struggle with. So some of the common issues that I see with families around practice include finding the time to practice when so many families now are, have these very busy schedules with a ton of extracurricular activities, music being one of them, sports and parties and tutoring. So just first of all, making the time for music practice can be a challenge. And then sometimes just another challenge that gets in the way is motivation. So the child just doesn't feel like it, they don't want to do it, it feels like another chore and things like that. And so that's probably why practice incentives were sort of devised as a way to incentivize students to actually get practice done. And in the education sector, there is quite a lot of debate around incentives. Because extrinsic motivation is seen as negative. So I'm gonna just go into more details about that. So maybe let me just start by sort of giving my own experience. First of all, when I was young, as in very young, so I started music lessons, I was 4 years old. I actually do not really have any memories of whether or not my teacher had any sort of incentives for practice. I do remember that at the beginning of my book, there was a table with every day of the week, and I had to write down how much time I practiced every day. And then every week I would have a new sheet. And so over the whole year, you could see how many minutes I had done of piano practice. But that's not an incentive. That is just me writing down how much time I spend practicing. I do remember, though, having stickers. Apparently when I was young, again, I do not even remember this. When I was young, I, just like so many kids, I absolutely loved stickers, that I would even steal the stickers of my older sister, who was also having piano lessons. So I loved stickers, and probably my teacher handed them out, or maybe they just came with the piano method book that we were learning. But I was passionate about stickers, but I don't remember if the stickers were used as a sort of incentive for finishing a song, or for doing any homework. I don't really remember why I got the stickers or where they came from. Now, as I changed teacher once I was in Australia, by then I was 10 years old, 10 or 11, so obviously a bit more mature, bit older. So my piano teacher just didn't really give any incentives at all, like none whatsoever. It was, we just come to your lesson, you would just play through some songs and then go home, and you know, she would assume that you would know what to work on and that you would do it, which is what I did. So I didn't need, first of all, any type of incentive, because I knew what the homework was, and by then I had built up a pretty stable practice routine. And furthermore, I actually loved playing piano, so for me, the motivation aspect of it was never missing. It was always there because I just enjoyed playing so much. Every once in a while though, like my teacher would give me a chocolate. Probably if I just like played really well, or if she was just like impressed with my progress. So every once in a while, sort of like an unexpected little surprise. And then of course with my harp teacher, similar story, she didn't give anything out if you did practice, you know, because it was sort of like the expected thing. You would just turn up to your lesson, you know, she would assume that you would have practiced, and then she would just give you more homework for the following week. And no rewards, like no stickers, no nothing. So yeah, I think I sort of, my own experience of learning music as a young person, I never really had any incentives. Practice was something I understood as something that needs to just be done. I actually enjoyed playing my instruments, and so for me practicing was not really a big struggle, which is probably why I didn't need the practice incentive in the first place. But now my experience as a teacher, I would say it really depends on the student. I have some students, they are really good with practice. They can do it by themselves, sort of like me, you know, they don't need any type of external reward because they just do it. And then some other students really enjoy having that little goal to work towards, and the goal can be like, you know, a silly one, like next week I'm just gonna get like a chocolate if I like do really good practice this week. So some of my students really love the idea of practicing towards something. And then some of my students don't need that type of thing. And then some of my students, they know they could get a little prize for practicing, but they're still not doing it. So the practice incentive, in my experience as a teacher, it doesn't fix all the problems. So if there is no home environment, probably for the child to practice, having the incentive isn't gonna change all that much. But anyway, I'm just gonna like go through some of my notes here. So I just wanted to give some of my personal experience, both as a child learning music and as a teacher, to just give a bit of context to the conversation. If you see me shaking, I'm freezing right now. It's so cold, and as you can see, I've got a scarf on, I've got my coat on, but my hands are absolutely, they feel like ice blocks. Whoa, it's very cold. Okay, so let's just begin first of all by establishing what a practice incentive is. And so they're just basically rewards or motivators that are used to encourage consistent practice. So, you know, incentives can come in all shapes and sizes. Stickers is a very commonly used one, candy or lollies. It could be screen time, points towards a prize, or even getting to choose the next song that your child gets to play. So they're very common, and especially for younger students who are still building habits and internal motivation. So in my studio, we do have a practice incentive. It's a whole program. So basically what happens is students receive a little diary when they start lessons, and for every single week there is like a weekly spread where they get to write down what they practice, and then they have to rate their practice out of four stars, with 4 stars being really efficient practice and 0 stars is no practice. And the idea is that students practice and they like track the quality of their practice and also the frequency of their practice. And of course, the more often they practice and the better type of practice they do, the more points they earn. And about every 60 points or so, students are eligible for a small prize, and the prizes get better as they go through more and more levels. So that is the practice incentive program at my music school. So they earn points first of all. Once they have enough points, they can earn prizes. And as they continue to earn points, the prizes get better. And so that's what I've devised at my music school. So this is a type of practice incentive as an example, okay? And so probably, if you have a young child, maybe like a primary school age child, you might even already use incentives for other activities or to support, the child doing homework or positive behavior or, getting chores done around the house, that type of thing. Lots of families use incentives already. So next question is whether incentives are beneficial or not. And I've already touched on it. It will sort of depend on the child and the family. But let's talk about why incentives might work and why some people think they are beneficial. So generally speaking, when you start music lessons and you've never had music lessons before, you've never learned an instrument, you're going to have to do something which is called practice, which means you're going to have to play your instrument ideally every day until your next lesson, so that by the time you get to your next lesson, you will have mastered whatever it is you learnt in the previous lesson. But for people who have never learnt music, sometimes they don't really know that they have to practice, or they might really struggle to fit it into their schedule. And so there is not much of a routine with practice. And so this is when the idea of an incentive can be really beneficial, because you'll have to remind your child, hey, if you do practice today, you can get an extra lolly or whatever it is. So you just remind them using an external positive thing that they can earn as a result of their work. And so, as I said, this can be great in the very early stages when you're just trying to establish a routine of going to the instrument and doing the homework there. Incentives can also be really beneficial if maybe there is a bit of a practice slump, or the practice routine has been disrupted, and so we need to build up that habit back. So you would reintroduce a practice incentive again to establish the routine again. And so it can be a great little way of motivating a student to start practicing again if they have been lacking motivation, because they can get motivation, like they will feel a sense of accomplishment once they have earned whatever incentive it is you're offering them. And so, as I just mentioned, practice incentives will definitely, bring a feeling of accomplishment in a student, especially so when they can also feel or recognize some type of progress or improvement in their playing. So then it's like the incentive is like a confirmation of the progress that they can already see or hear. But of course, like with so many things, not everyone, not all teachers out there make a case for incentives. So some teachers sort of argue against them for the following reasons. So basically, an over-reliance on incentives can backfire. So, for example, if a student is only practicing to get that prize, they sort of miss the point. They miss, the focus is on the wrong thing. The focus isn't on the music itself, on the learning. It's sort of on that external incentive, that external prize. So that can be damaging because, then if that incentive is no longer there, chances are they're not going to be interested in music because the whole experience was never about the music itself to start with. And so related to that, of course, is that students can become less self-directed. And so if there is no external reward for their work, then they're not going to have any motivation left to get anything done. So that's when, an incentive can actually just not work. And then finally, a third reason why incentives can be a bit more of a red flag is that it shifts the focus away from musical growth and it moves it towards compliance. So just doing something because someone told you to, or because someone's going to give you something afterwards. And so again, it takes the focus away from the music towards something different. So, and as I said, in my own students, I see a whole wide range of attitudes towards incentives. Some of my students don't care about it and they will practice very well without an incentive. Some of my students love having the practice incentive. It just gives them that much more motivation. But they would already be motivated without it. It just gives them something new to have fun with. And some students know that they could earn prizes, but they just decide not to, or they're not interested in it. Or maybe their routine at home isn't established enough. So basically, there is no right or wrong answer to this. It will really depend on the child and on the family. But let me tell you some ideas for what you could do as an incentive if you do want to give it a try. And as I mentioned, but incentives would be great, especially in the early stages of learning music, whilst you're trying to establish a practice routine. So the incentive sort of acts as a reminder that practice needs to get done. And then after a couple of weeks, you know, once the practice habit is starting to become regular, almost automatic, then just slowly take away the incentive. So if you are wanting to implement a bit of a practice incentive at home, so here are some ideas. So if your child is very young, then a sticker chart. So young kids absolutely love stickers. I am still surprised how much they love it, but apparently I was also crazy about them when I was young. So, and so after 10 to 15 practices in the sticker chart, then maybe you can just give your kid a tiny prize. You know, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, a little toy, fidget toys, something like that they are going to play with and feel really proud of having achieved. Or maybe, you know, they earn prizes or they earn points, and then after X number of points, they win a certificate. And another one would be to choose a fun piece to learn, or even doing a little concert at home. So that would be an incentive there to get them to practice. Now for teenagers, you might have to use slightly different incentives, you know, to cater it more to their age and to their interests. So, for example, you know, consistent weekly practice would equal to a bit more screen time for them, or more video game time. Or perhaps by practicing, they can earn a practice pass. So they can redeem for a day of practice. Or you could, you know, get them to practice by telling them that if they play really well, you can create a TikTok playlist or a video of their own playing, and you can only do that if they practice X amount of days for X amount of weeks, something like that. So what we want to do with incentives, especially for you know, in the examples that I've provided here, is we want to reward effort and consistency, not necessarily the actual result of the practice. So just keep that in mind as well. It's more, if a student practices every day, but maybe they're like, you know, a little bit of a slower type of learner, or even after a week of practice, they're still not getting it, I would still want to kind of acknowledge the effort that the student has put in. Even though they actually haven't been able to like master the particular thing, they have put in the work, and so that needs recognition. So don't fall into the trap of only rewarding results and sort of not rewarding effort or time spent working, because that's also very important, because it sort of sends, anyway, I think as a teacher, I want to send the message that, you know, I appreciate your effort more than the result. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, if you fall on the spectrum of hating incentives, but you still want to do something at home to, you know, maybe encourage practice, then here are some ideas for you. So, as I mentioned lots of times already, instead of going for rewards, you want to go for routine. So you do that by making practice a non-negotiable part of the day. So keep it consistent and scheduled for your child. Use connection and encouragement. So when they're practicing, just sit around close by, have a listen, ask them questions about what they're doing or how they're doing it. And if you notice improvements, Like, don't be afraid to voice that, as that gives them encouragement and they will be motivated to continue. So yeah, sometimes it's your attention that is the reward. You can help your child with goal setting, whether that's a weekly practice goal or a monthly goal or a performance goal. And again, here we're celebrating the effort as well as the achievement once it has been achieved. And use performance opportunities sort of as practice incentives. So when there's a recital coming up, concerts, you can invite people over, like your friends or neighbors, and you get your child to perform for them, because obviously in order to perform they would need to be very well prepared, and that will require practice. So there we go, that's all that I've got for you for today. So we talked about practice incentives and whether or not to use them. You know, I still don't know whether or not practice incentives are terrible, but what I will tell you is that, funny story, my husband is studying to be a classroom music teacher, and he recently had his prac at a local high school. And during his uni studies, reading a lot of theory about education and how a lot of education experts say that external rewards are not good because it's teaching the wrong thing to children and blah blah blah. But in his prac, he had to do something called a chocolate challenge questions, and so it was to test students on their understanding of a concept by asking a challenging question to see who would be able to answer it. And if a student could answer the difficult question, they would get a chocolate. And he was so surprised to see how excited the students were to have to answer a difficult question, knowing that if they got it right, they would get a chocolate. So my husband was just very, sort of surprised how the theory of education is so sometimes opposite to the practice of it, and how you might have this amazing theory, but in practical life it actually doesn't work the way you think it would. So that's all very interesting. So have a try with practice incentives. Again, it's something you can just try for a bit, but now you know what some of the red flags are. Over reliance on incentives can take away like the benefits of it. So you also don't want to overdo it, and to make everything about earning prizes and things like that. You still want to enjoy being able to make music, you want to enjoy the music that you play, and so on. So if you enjoyed this episode, let me know in the comments below. You can also send me an email, hello@musicmakersacademy.com.au. What else? Instagram @musicmakersacademy. So thank you. I look forward to speaking to you next week for another episode.